episode 780. Free agency is officially open, and there's been a flurry of activity in less than 24 hours. The Packers have signed a couple players and lost a couple players. We'll break it down with Scott McKenna of the Talkin S-Mac blog. It's all coming up on Railbird Central next. Good morning, Green Bay Packers fans, and welcome to Railbird Central at Cheesehead TV, the longest tenured Packers podcast on the internet. I'm your host, Brian Carvu, and we're discussing free agency. To do that, we have a guest joining us on the phone today. We have Scott McKenna of the Talkin S-Mac blog joining us this morning. Scott, how are you today?
I'm great, Brian. How are you?
Very good. Glad you could join us on the show, and we've got a lot to get to since the start of free agency opened yesterday. Scott, the big news was Nick Perry re-signing with the Green Bay Packers for north of $10 million a season. What was your reaction, including how much the Packers had to pay to retain him?
Well, I was really happy that the Packers retained him because, frankly, he was our best defensive player last year. And in some ways, it just seems like we're playing with monopoly money when you see the money that's being tossed around for players across the league. So I had assumed that he was going to be getting, maybe north of $10 million. And I feared it might end up being closer to $15 million that somebody might just throw at him. When you look at the amount of cap room that some of the other teams had and just where Perry had aligned himself as potentially the top, edge player that wasn't either franchised or tagged in some fashion. So it really, I didn't think there was any chance that Perry would be back, but was very excited that Ted ponied up, and it looked like they've structured the contract in a way to where there isn't a ton of damage this year. So there's still going to be opportunity for the Packers to be active this offseason.
Yeah, it's clear the Packers made Nick priority, their top priority in free agency. And, as far as the money goes, there's only like less than $20 million guaranteed, I think 18, which is not too bad. They could eventually get out of the contract down the road and not have to, be burdened by it too much. And, I think it's a good signing for the Green Bay Packers here with Nick Perry. Scott, what do you think of the linebacker rotation will look like in 2017? Not just Nick Perry, but where will Clay Matthews line up and who will rotate with them?
Well, it's a long ways away from that. I still think, from being able to totally be able to make that projection. But because I do think that the Packers are going to add another body or two in free agency at the linebacker position, and I do think that they'll be active there on draft day as far as adding to the linebacker position. But as we are today, Perry's going to be on the outside. You'd think that Matthews will continue to play a little bit of a rover situation where he's sometimes inside, sometimes outside. I've been very vocal about wishing he spent more time on the inside. And then moving to the outside on passing downs. I still think that's an option. They clearly do like Joe Thomas. They brought him back. And there seems to be this wave in Green Bay, Wisconsin about the Blake and Jake thing that people get all excited about, that, maybe a little bit more excited than I do. But I do think the Packers are going to be active over the next 2 months or so with adding additional linebackers and making it a really competitive position in camp.
All right, moving on from Nick Perry, Scott, we know J.C. Tretter signed with the Cleveland Browns for an average of more than $5 million a season and $10 million guaranteed. I'll ask you a few questions here because I think they all kind of go hand in hand. First of all, should the Packers been more aggressive in keeping J.C. Tretter? And B, the Packers also re-signed Don Barclay to a very modest contract. Are you comfortable with Don Barclay now being essentially the backup center? Because, whether or not, we can look at it, Don Barclay had a very poor season and maybe the past 2 seasons. But the Packers on game days got to keep on their roster a backup center who they're comfortable with basically starting should anything happen to Corey Linsley now. So what are your thoughts on basically the center position in Green Bay? Who's going and who's staying?
I wish Treader well. He's a fantastic athlete and a terrific offensive lineman who can really play all five positions. At some point, you just have to, cut your losses in this free agency game, and I don't think that the Packers could have ponied up what the Browns were able to offer. And I really wish Treader well. He was a good player. I had a hard time staying healthy, and because of that, I don't think that the Packers just could make any investment that the Browns had made for him. I've been a long Don Barclay fan. I'm a West Virginia Mountaineer fan. They're in my family's blood. So I've been rooting for Barclay before I think most Packer fans knew who Barclay was. But the reality is he just hasn't been the same football player since he had his knee injury. And I saw it was a 1 year, $1.3 million deal. I didn't see any terms as to what was guaranteed, if any, and what sort of impact there was on the on the salary cap if he might not make the roster for whatever reason, even though he does bring versatility that is valued certainly by McCarthy. I just wonder if that was not just an insurance signing, get him through the door, and they paid him I think probably double what anybody else would have paid him, and you get him through the door. Maybe if it's not guaranteed, you bring in some guys later on that are going to be either undrafted free agents. You get, some others that have just been in the mix, and you wonder whether Barclay is going to, have to compete for a roster spot, or if they do have him in ink as the backup, potential guard and the backup potential center, and a guy that if in an absolute worst case scenario, they can swing outside and have him play tackle. But the Barclay thing was curious. I was surprised that they paid him as much as they did. But with that said, I didn't see if anything was guaranteed, and I think that would be a telltale as to what their plans are for him this year.
Yeah, I tend to think it would be more in the form of a roster bonus as opposed to a signing bonus for terms of incentives for him. So he'd get paid a little bit more if he makes the roster. I've been very critical of Don Barclay the past 2 years, but I will say this about him. He knows how to play all five positions on the offensive line. I do think he's gotten better late toward the end of the year last year. I think he's better as an interior player than as a tackle because he got absolutely blown up at tackle during the preseason, and everybody was like, what's he doing out there? But he's better if he plays guard or center. And the Packers, really, they need somebody out there who's comfortable just in case Corey Linsley who goes down. They need to have a center for the rest of the year. Could that be Don Barclay? Could it be a guy on the practice squad like Lucas Patrick from last season? Otherwise, they may have to draft somebody in this year's NFL draft, but that's an interesting debate and one that flies under the radar. Scott, the other Packers free agent on the offensive line is TJ Lang. He's reportedly set up visits with Detroit and Seattle. What's your prediction on what happens with TJ Lang?
I actually went very vocal on Twitter about TJ Lang last night, and I just feel like TJ Lang has been one of those guys that is just an anchor of what it means to be a Green Bay Packer. He's been such just a terrific leader for this organization and for this team, and he's just been a pillar for not just the offensive line, but just the roster and the team as a whole. And he's just been a turn back the clock, old school professional. And I really just have a hard time believing that TJ Lang is not in a Packer uniform next year. I will admit that at first I thought he might be getting, $10 to $11 million, and that might happen over, the first hour or two of free agency. But when that didn't happen, and he's going 2 visits, and it's in my heart of heart, I just really believe that TJ Lang wants to be in Green Bay. I think he loves the camaraderie with Aaron Rodgers, and I think Ted Thompson looks at TJ Lang as always his boy. And maybe I'm crazy, but Ted loves to keep his own. We all know that, and it may appear as though we've quote unquote overpaid for TJ Lang. But I will, when it's all said and done, I think Lang is going to end up giving a little bit of a hometown discount and he's going to end up staying in Green Bay. Could be wrong, but that's just what my gut is. And I did some just quick research. What's interesting is like when you see these what the cost of living is in all these other markets, it's like it's unbelievable why somebody wouldn't take a minor pay cut to stay in Green Bay. You'd be making more money, right? And the cost of living is so minimal, and it just seems to me like that should be something that is put into the equation when these guys are looking at contracts, and just the level of comfortability of what it's like to play football in Green Bay, Wisconsin, I think should carry some weight. But that's just me and one man's opinion. But I don't think it can be overlooked that just like you and I being born as Midwest folk, TJ is wired that same way. And I think ultimately that'll play a role in this thing. And I'll be surprised if he's not back in Green Bay.
I tend to think the same way because I looked at Tretter and Lang as the two free agents on the Packers offensive line. And just when I looked at them both, it made sense to me that the Packers would prioritize Lang because all of a sudden they have an opening if Lang were to leave at right guard. And to me, you don't sign J.C. I'm just not sure J.C. Tretter would be a starting guard in the NFL. He doesn't seem to have that girth to be able to handle the guard position, which I know is kind of, maybe, grasping when you're talking about him being an NFL center. But I think that center is a little bit different from guard. And so I think that's why Lang was a priority for the Packers. Maybe his injury keeps the asking price down a little bit in terms of other teams being a little leery of giving him all that money. But this will be one of the more interesting developments of the free agency season for the Packers here. Scott, moving on, Micah Hyde officially signed with the Buffalo Bills for an average of roughly $6 million per season. Do you think the Packers made the right decision in letting him walk away?
I love Micah Hyde. He has been an absolute artisan, a true professional for the Packers. And anything that they've ever needed for him or anything they've ever asked of him, he's done it, and he's done it very, very, very well. I look at Micah Hyde, and I think that it was probably in his best interests to go find a defensive system that might utilize his skills and his traits differently. And I think it was maybe in the Packers' best interest as well. Packers need to get faster in the secondary, and losing Hyde, it hurts. It really, really does hurt. He offered so many different traits and talents that this team really needs. But at some point, we need to make our investments in the secondary to add speed. And especially on the perimeter, that's at some point. I really hope that there is an addition or two this offseason at the perimeter cornerback position. If it had to come at the expense of Hyde, so be it. He got paid more than I think the Packers could afford to give him. It's always sad when you read that the Packers didn't make an offer. I wish that something would have happened there, even if it was under market value, just to sort of, tease the palate, so to speak. But, I wish Hyde very, very, very well. He's the type of guy that you could someday potentially see back in Green Bay. But I really think he could flourish in a new system that allows him to be a little bit of a rover and to be truly hidden and maybe a little bit of a focal point in the secondary as coming on blitzes and attacking the line of scrimmage rather than being a cover corner that he was oftentimes with us.
Yeah, the Packers should be getting a roughly fifth-round draft pick in compensation for his losses, assuming they don't sign more players and then they lose. So you can look at it through that way, and you can also look at it through this prism as well. I think when they let Micah Hyde go, is yes, the young cornerbacks on the roster like Demarius Randall and Quentin Rollins were much maligned this past season, but I think the Packers may think, okay, these guys failed on the perimeter. They're probably better on the inside. They're faster than Micah Hyde was on the inside. And where the Packers' priority this offseason is going to be is on the perimeter. They may go and sign a veteran cornerback as a perimeter cornerback this offseason. They may draft a perimeter cornerback this offseason. So they've got the replacements already on the roster to play the slot, and that's Rollins and Randall. And it's a little bit of a risk, but I mean, you're not going to give up on those guys already. So it is what it is, I suppose.
Agreed.
All right, we got lots of players to get through, so we'll just move on here. Jared Cook, reportedly, just minutes before the show here, from Adam Schefter of ESPN, and if Adam Schefter's reporting it, it's probably true. He says talks have broken off between the Packers and Cook. Other reports from, I know the Green Bay Press-Gazette has reported, the Lions, the Bears, the Bills are all interested in Jared Cook. Scott, do you think the Packers will have to pay more than anticipated to keep him?
I absolutely do. I mean, when you see this Deion Sims deal yesterday, $3 million, or $18 million over 3 years or whatever it was, over $6 million a year, I'm sure the Packers have already offered that, and more than that, I should say. And the fact that Cook is not accepting that, then it makes me wonder if he was just speaking without meaning last December when he was talking about how much he really enjoyed playing in Green Bay and how he really hoped he would stay in Green Bay and how he was having fun playing football for the first time and in a long time. And then the letter that he wrote, and I forget where that was published, was it maybe SI, where he just went on and was super articulate in talking about what a great experience he was having in Green Bay, Wisconsin. And you just have to wonder, like, really what is important to him, and if it's him making his decision or his agent making the decision here. But it's too bad that the contract has dragged out. I do think that Cook was maybe the number one priority, followed by Perry. They got Perry done. I think that they probably thought that they could get Cook done without an issue, and wouldn't have surprised me if maybe Ted tried to get it nailed down for $5 million or so before all this money started rolling into tight ends, and Cook, didn't bite, and now they're going to get themselves in a bidding war, and I'm not sure the Packers are going to be able to win this one. And I think that most people thought that Cook was a lock to come back, and now, frankly, I'm a bit concerned by it because people have money to spend, and Cook at times showed that he could be a real great weapon last year.
Yeah, this could be a little bit of posturing. I shared these sentiments on Twitter myself, and I said I think the Packers probably offered Cook a fair contract, and now he's just got to decide, does he want a fair contract or does he want more and risk not playing with Aaron Rodgers, basically, because I think there's certainly worth to that. I mean, if he's being offered $5 million by the Packers and $6 million by the Bears, is that worth it? As you said, to go live in Chicago for a higher cost of living and play with a worse quarterback? You would think he'd almost, should take the $1 million less per season, and maybe the Packers can pony up a little bit more. We're in the day and age where, as long as the salary cap keeps going up, we shouldn't be surprised at the size of the contracts these players keep signing. It's only going to continue that way when it jumps up by $10 million a season, as it has now for like 4 straight years. But we got more players here, Scott. Eddie Lacy reportedly visiting the Vikings and the Seahawks. That's coming directly from his agent, as shared on social media. What's your prediction on Lacy?
I've a part of me wishes that the Packers would move on from Lacy and bring in one of these, like a Jamal Charles or an Adrian Peterson type back, and to have them be here on a 2 or 3 year contract at for lighter money than what you might have been able to expect to get somebody like that signed for. I think Eddie Lacy is looking for anyone that will offer him a multi-year deal. Or if he's going to be looking for a 1 year deal, it's going to be for big guarantees. And I just don't think Eddie Lacy is at this stage. I love Eddie Lacy. He's been a terrific. He was a terrific Packer his first 2 years here. But I wonder if Lacey is worth more than a 1 year, $1.5 million contract to go and earn something similar to what you did with Cook last year. And I don't know if Lacey is appetized by that thought. So it's an interesting dilemma, and it's a tough position. I personally don't want to surround myself with people that football isn't important to, and I think that that's a question for Lacey right now. I think and if you can get a guy like a Peterson, who hasn't drawn a ton of attention, for just a little bit more money, and Peterson can be a guy that is going to be able to give you. We don't need a guy that's going to give us 25 carries a game. But if he can give 10 to 12 carries a game, it isn't the focal point, but is a threat every single time he touches the football to take it to the house. That to me is a logical signing, and it would be an interesting thing to see if Ted would ever kick the tire on that or not. But maybe I'm dreaming with that statement. But I would be shocked at this stage if Lacey comes back. I'd be shocked if it's more than a 1 year deal. And I guess I'm kind of 50-50 as to whether he'd be back, whether he's going to be back, leaning no at this stage.
Yeah, to kind of compliment what you said on whether he loves the game or not, the term Packer people is thrown out quite a bit because it's a term Mike McCarthy used in his press conference when he was hired as coach of the Packers. I think people think Packer people and they think, choir boy and he good in the community and all those things. No, what Packer people means is, do you love football? If you're going to come to Green Bay where there's not this huge entertainment and metropolitan area, you better love football so much that it is, you eat, breathe, then sleep it. And I'm not sure Eddie Lacy does that. But the Packers, they were so desperate for a running back the year they drafted him. They kind of made, they allowed that to slide a little bit and took Eddie Lacy's upside. And now they have to decide whether they'll keep him or not. But we've got so many guys to get to here. Scott, what do you think the Packers will make a run at Devon House?
I think I put this out there at some point, roughly a month ago or so, that I thought Devon House was going to get cut by the Jaguars and the Packers were going to pick him up. And it's just it seemed like it was one of those things that was just destined to happen. But what's Devon House worth? He's got, 6 career interceptions. 4 of them came in his first year in Jacksonville. He's not a proven playmaker. This defense needs people. They're going to force turnovers. House isn't that guy. He isn't. What he's been in the league 6 years, and 5 of the 6 years he's got a combined 2 interceptions. And I'm not going to hate on him coming in. I'm a fan of Devon House to a degree, but if is he getting more than $2 or $3 million a year? I don't know that I would give that to him. And we got to remember he's getting cut by the Jacksonville Jaguars for a reason. So. It's and it's not like a bunch of other teams are jumping at him from what it reads, right? So competition seems lighter there for him. Wouldn't surprise me if he's in Green Bay. He knows the system. There's familiarity there. But is he going to come in here and make us make game changing plays and to change alter our defense? He's not that player. So it's with cautious optimism that you get excited for it. But yes, I do think the Packers will make a push towards Devon House.
Yeah, this one just makes sense because he was released. He doesn't count in that compensatory draft pick equation. I think the Packers will make a run at Devon House at some point. He's probably not the priority right now as they looking at guys at Lang and Cook instead. But after they get done, they could sign a guy like Devon House. And yeah, he may not be the major piece of the puzzle, but after their struggles last year, I don't think it can hurt to bring him back. And maybe he kind of recaptures the magic that he had, not in 2016 in Jacksonville, but 2015. he didn't play too bad. I mean, he had career highs in passes defensed and interceptions and all those things. And the Packers could use that kind of player. Scott, the Packers officially declined to tender linebacker Jaron Elliott, which would have cost nearly $1.8 million. Did they make the correct decision? Do you think they still bring him back, but at a lesser dollar amount?
I do think that he'll be brought back at a lesser dollar amount, and I do think they made the right decision. Jaron Elliott is not worth $1.8 million at this stage, right? He's shown glimpses at occasion during the regular season of being able to make plays. He had a couple of preseasons in which he looked phenomenal. Never really translated over to the regular season as an elite pass rusher, a guy that could even flash as a pass rusher there. So at this stage, I do think that Elliott is back. I don't, obviously I would not have tendered him for that money. Does bring special teams value. Seems to fit the locker room and all that good stuff. But I was not disappointed with the fact that they did not offer the tender.
Yeah, I think they'll tender him. I think they'll re-sign Jordan Tripp for, another minimal contract. Interesting that they declined to give the exclusive rights tender to John Crockett. It appears as if he's not coming back this season, or at least not right away. Scott, any thoughts before we let you go on the combine, or who you think might be options for the Packers in the first round? Is kind of some parting thoughts here.
Yeah, I'm really high on Fabian Moreau from UCLA. Fits that he's got that size to be able to play on the outside of the perimeter, and really showed faster than I knew he'd run, but he showed faster than I thought he'd run. And that to me, and obviously the Packers have a history of running, of drafting UCLA players. So that to me was very exciting, and it was also very exciting to see what Watt did in his performance. And those are two guys that sort of fit the Packers' brethren of players that they would draft. And but then additionally, they really showed that they were top-notch athletes and could bring a heightened athleticism to the defense of the Packers, which really needs to be a focus. We need speed, we need athleticism on defense, and I think we've overlooked some of that in the past. So I really hope that that's going to be an emphasis. I think Hassan Reddick really showed that he's going to be able to. He looks like he's going to be able to transition to the inside linebacker position, and if he's around, I know that you and I had a quick exchange on Twitter that he'd be a guy that would have to strongly be considered at the 29th pick. So those are a couple of names that I guess I'm looking at. Moreau might not be a first rounder, might be a second rounder, but he's somebody that certainly has my eye, and he can just turn and run with the best of them, and he has the speed to play the edge. So love his physicality, and is somebody that I would be excited to have in green and gold.
Yeah, those are all very good names. I agree very much that the Packers could consider all of them. I don't, if Hassan Reddick is there, I don't know if the Packers can pass him up. I don't know if he'll get to the Packers. I tend to think now, after what he did at the Senior Bowl, after what he did at the Combine, he's no longer going to reach the 29th pick. But if he did, I think the Packers would have a hard time passing him up. But I think T.J. Watt could be a very good second option if he's not around. We'll see how it plays out. Scott?
Hey, Brian. Yeah, Brian, one last thought before I let you go. Ted Thompson's going to get challenged here because he's going to have an option to be able to do things differently than he's ever done it before. And I really think that there's going to be some guys that are veterans that are going to be able to be had on short-term contracts at a reasonable price. And you look at the Elvis Dumervilles and the Mario Williams, and I still think that Julius Peppers could be back in Green Bay as well. The Connor Barwins of the world that have all been released. And when you're released and all of a sudden you don't fall into that compensatory equation, I'm going to be very curious to see if Ted Thompson steps outside of his normal bag of tricks and does some things a little differently as free agency goes along, and especially if he ends up not being able to sign a Cook or a Lang in a Lacey, because at some point you can only have so many holes on this roster, and I think that you might be able to get them you might be able to get them plugged with veterans at a very reasonable cost and short-term deals. But going to be curious to see if Thompson makes any of those deals this year before this free agency is over.
It'll be fun to watch. Scott, we'll talk draft more heavily next month, okay?
Cheers, man.
Take care.
Go Pack Go.
Scott McKenna of the Talkin S-Mac blog joining us here at Railbird Central on a Friday morning. Glad to have him joining us. Glad to have you, the listener, join us. And Scott is Buzzboy3 on Twitter, at Buzzboy3, if you want to give him a follow. We've pretty much covered all the Packers news there is to cover, so we'll kind of forego that. And it was a long, half-hour-long interview today with Scott, longer than most of our interviews. So I'll just have this if you're interested in our usual segments, the day ahead in the world of the Green Bay Packers, in addition to the free agency flurry that'll continue over the weekend, and that's where all the attention's going to be. A minor note, there's also another NFL regional combine this Saturday. This one takes place at the Saints training facility in New Orleans. So, the pro days, the combines, they continue in the limelight of free agency here, which will take precedence over the next few days. We'll continue to see what happens over the weekend. We'll talk about any updates, any signings, any more players leaving Green Bay. We'll get to it on Monday on the next episode. Railbird Central airs every Monday, Wednesday, Friday at 8:30 a.m. Central Time. The live edition of the show podcasted and on demand later in the day. So thank you, everybody, for joining us. Basically, I'll leave you with this today. Our call to action here. Today's show is brought to you by Beer Rock, Madison's upcoming craft beer bar, looking to open in the coming months, of which I am the prospective owner. We have created a crowdfunding campaign to get some startup capital for this. We hope it's a Packers bar that you can come and watch games, and would definitely love if you considered giving us, making a contribution for which you will be rewarded. We have several reward levels. Please check it out at GoFundMe.com/BeerRock, GoFundMe.com/BeerRock. We created this video in this clip to accompany our campaign. Please give it a listen. And yeah. Hey everyone, this is Brian Carrevu, and hopefully sometime soon you'll know me as the owner of Beer Rock, a craft beer bar in Madison, Wisconsin. You might be asking, what the heck is a Beer Rock? Well, it's the family recipe of my wife Amanda, and it's going to be the signature item on our menu. In its simplest terms, a Beer Rock is similar to a pasty, except better. It's a savory pastry filled with beef, sauerkraut, onion, cheese, and seasoning. At least that's the traditional version. We also plan on having other various interpretations. How does a Korean Beer Rock with pork and kimchi sound? To make this a reality, however, we need your help. We're looking to get a small business loan to do all sorts of things like lease a property and buy all the equipment we need. That's why we set up a GoFundMe campaign. Your donation will go towards the equity needed to secure that loan. Once that's done, the dominoes will start falling. Best of all, we've created several reward levels to thank you for your generosity. They range from branded t-shirts to free food and drink on premise. So please take the time to explore, and thank you for your consideration. We hope you become one of the founding members of Beer Rock and Bottoms Up. Once again, folks, that's GoFundMe.com/BeerRock. Thank you all so much for joining us today. Have a good weekend. We'll talk to you again on Monday. I leave you today with a song called Let's Go Outside by the String Cheese Incident on Sci Fidelity Records. See everyone. Go Pack Go.